Hi, good evening. I believe the panel has started. So, welcome if you already tuned in. My name is Guni Fortuambaga. I'll be your host for this evening and I'll be moderating the panel. So, if you don't know what we're doing today, tonight's panel is themed Do It for the Culture and is presented by creative agency GoTo, based here in Amsterdam, and music platform Eurosonic Noorderslag. For the 35th edition of the festival. Um, Obviously, there are some limitations due to COVID, and therefore, the overarching theme for this year is Road to Recovery. The theme is chosen almost as an exploratory term in which we want to look ahead and start preparing for this new reality. So, do it for the culture, and this panel is going to explore the intersection of contemporary culture and business and why it's important for businesses to facilitate cultural growth. So, whether you're a car manufacturer, clothing company, artist, a record label, a bookmaker like myself, the expectation is that you're capable of adding value to the community you're serving, and it's better to be authentic. But hey, before we dive more into that, I want to introduce the panelists for today. So we have Ladies Love Hip Hop from Sweden, this all female DJ collective. Hi there, consisting out of Rebecca, Natasha, and Linda. Welcome, ladies. Glad to have you in the panel. Our second panelist is Mr. G from Pata, also based here in Amsterdam. Legendary streetwear icon, I would say, a pioneer truly for this culture that we have here in Amsterdam. And last but not least, we have my man Eugene Khan from Mekan tuning in, our international guest. Some of you might know Eugene from High Beast, and yeah, the amazing work he did there, almost to mature this culture of ours. And is many of you also know his current endeavor in Macon. So now that you guys know who the panelists are, a little bit about the context of this panel tonight, I thought let us start off with yeah, just a brief introduction of the context. The subject of culture is so broad. I thought it would be nice to at least give a framework to the conversation tonight. So here we go. Since this year, basically, since COVID-19 outbreak hit most countries around the world in March, every single aspect of our lives has been severely disrupted. So this holds true, obviously, also for the creative industry. Where normally speaking, physical events, launches, gatherings of humans were fundamental marketing moments, right? Um, Whilst it's true that influence, both within its meaning and who's driving it, has been changing for years, and it's a continual changing concept. The speed at which this change is happening is more accelerated than ever before. So the most innovative leaders that we have today, and the movers and shakers within the creative industry, embrace this change. Right? It fuels them actually. One might even say that they saw it coming long before their industries were disrupted or impacted. The world moved online, and the people who foresaw that are standing on top of the industry as we speak. It's what always distinguished them from the old goalkeepers, traditional media, big retailers, celebrities, who no longer have the same power and positions as they had before even this recent crisis. So with this power that we now have, being able to surpass third parties and speak directly to our audiences using localization caused by this global pandemic to our advantage. Oh man, this brings a lot of interesting opportunities. So today the people in the panel, according to me, are true cultural pioneers in their own respective fields. They're part of a emerging group of people whose power is not found in traditional authority, um, but more people who are the first wave to drive culture forward. People that are quick to adapt, stay ahead. So those that can innovatively shift our time, attention, and subsequently our euros and dollars towards new launches by driving real change that benefits the greater good of us all, makes us grow as individuals, helps us win. The rest is fluff, one might say. So to round the intro off, nowadays, because of social media, another important element influence not only for the large companies as it was perhaps post-industrialization. Nowadays, even a single person can make a huge impact. I mean, the examples are plentiful. These emerging personalities and young brands write their own rules. They serve as an early look to where society is heading towards, culturally speaking. So with this panel, guys, I hope we'll be able to stimulate the way companies invest in culture, and yeah, discuss the role of culture's impact on business and vice versa. So to get this thing started, I would like to ask the first question is the same question to all of you. What, according to you, is the culture? And perhaps we can start off with Ladies Love Hip Hop.
Uh, so yeah, we are sending live here from Stockholm, Sweden. Um, and if we think about our culture here, it's a lot about like self-expression. Like we do, um, we work within the um, music industry, but we also touch on different elements in the culture. And we can see that a lot of our community and our culture is about different ways to express yourself. Um, yeah, what do you want to add?
Yeah, so we started off as a DJ collective, and so through that we've met with like different photographers, artists, like different people in our culture. And I think here in Sweden we have a very like strong individual way of expressing ourselves through fashion, through music, or whatever it is. And our community is filled with like different creators and yeah, people in that culture.
I see. And if you would, perhaps I can formulate it this way: how you guys describe the culture before you guys entered the scene and after in your respective industry?
Ooh. So like I said, we started off as DJs,
Yeah.
and before we started, the the scene was mainly like that. It was mainly dominant by men, and also like we started DJing hip hop music, and that scene was like not really progressive. So the music that you would hear at the clubs would be like old songs, we thought at least. So at first we just went out because we wanted to have fun. But then we started to criticize, like among us. We were like, okay, this song again? What?
Yeah, we were like,
Really?
why aren't we hearing the music that we're listening to?
Yeah, where's like the new fresh music? So that's why we started. And when we started DJing, we already had some contacts, so we could play at the nice clubs and stuff. And we just played the music that we wanted to play. And through that, the whole scene started to like evolve because it was like unusual to watch female DJs. So today we have plenty of female DJs, and that's like a movement that isn't just here in Sweden. We can see that around in the world as well. That more females are taking place behind
Yeah.
the decks.
And also there's room for like all kinds of subgenres and
Yeah,
within like hip hop, R&B at the clubs, which it wasn't when we started. Like
exactly.
now we have DJs who are like focused in one genre or one like
Subgenre.
subgenre. Yeah.
And the same goes with the artists, like in the music scene. So when we started off, we only had a few hip hop artists that were actually doing music in Swedish. But today we have alternative hip hop, alternative R&B. So the thing that we want to see evolve and that we want to be a part of is evolving that scene so that we can have more platforms for a broader scene.
I see. So as we're to make the bridge with the introduction, right? You guys would be, yeah, one of those collectives that wrote their own rules. So you guys looked at the culture and the scene at play, and were like, "Nah, we would like to see that a little bit different." And you guys also served as an early look to where society was heading towards culturally, as you say, because of perhaps your yeah, you guys existing and doing what you guys done. There's this catalytic effect noticeable, that you see more of what you do even outside of your own collective.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah,
Nice.
instead of getting booked, we created our own events. So that was also a big part of why we could write our own rules because we took care of it ourselves.
I see. Well, I'm going to pose the same question to G. Your story and the Pata story has, of course, been heralded many a times. I think some of our viewers might know it, but yeah, to ask you the same question, how would you describe the culture before you entered the scene and after? So, what's your impact on the culture?
I don't necessarily know exactly what our direct impact is because I guess when we started, we were in the beginning of what the culture is as we know today. Well, if you look at the literal meaning of culture, like the IDs, the customs, social behavior of a particular group of people or a society. If you then that translate that to what Pata is, we are kind of built up out of a couple of pillars, things that are important to us: sports, music, social awareness, and of course style. You know that's what we do as well. And we translate all these things to our surroundings, right? So I guess we have been always been a very much of a communicative brand and also very touchable. So we do all types of things to um, keep communicating with the people that like what we do and have the similar tastes and interests of what we do. But I would definitely say that as I said in the beginning, like we were in the beginning phase, you know, so I guess we touched both sides. It was a very small and very much very slow way of getting information and all these type of things. And then 2004, internet, music, everything travels fast, you know. So I guess that's the big change between before we were there and where we are now. And I'm not sure that we are that I can say that we are in that sense people that made a difference in that, you know.
I hear you. I hear your answer, but
Yeah.
yeah, being on this panel, I can tell you from my own experience, y'all brand was one of the first black-owned brands that I saw in this country that I really could, touch and visit. So I think you might be downplaying your impact on the culture a little bit, but we'll get back to that in a second. Eugene, yeah.
Yeah.
Question to you, the broad one, just what your thoughts are regarding the culture, and then a very personal one. Yeah, how you found this culture? Perhaps I don't know, after your studies when you started working, and yeah, your analysis of the current status quo.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when this was one of the first questions that popped out, I had to think to myself, like, what is? I mean, you could go and type it into Google, like, what's the official definition? But I was like, maybe just think to myself, what is culture? And like, for me, it was about a commonality of ideas, concepts, like just things that helped group people together, right? And I think those things could very well be either tangible things or intangible. And in the case of tangible, it could be like, G and Pata and street culture. It could be people in the sneakers, collecting vinyl, a whole slew of things, right? That was sort of the jumping off point for you to form a base for these people to connect. And on the intangible side, I think that's where you see a lot more of these philosophies or ways of life. So, for example, there's like a Canadian culture, there's a Dutch culture, etc. And I think those were things that I didn't really think that analytically when I first started, my career in this industry, my so-called career, at Hypebeast. It was more like, well, I like sneakers, and sneakers for me growing up in a small town in Canada was a way for me to connect with a sporting background because I played a lot of football and I was really big into sport, like the design of sneakers and sports equipment. And for me, like that was just another layer to it. And then when I was able to go to Hong Kong, see my family every few years, it was like, oh shit, there's like a ton of other stuff here with people that are into this world that I personally liked for different reasons, but then I soon understood there was a culture behind it. And from that, I think that as we see it now, culture, for the most part, I think generally starts without any sort of desired goal. Like you don't start a culture because like I'm going to achieve anything beyond bringing people together. I think what you see now is that because of like late stage capitalism or whatever, it's like every culture needs to be monetized in a certain way. So if it started off with people connecting over sneakers, obviously look at the state of sneakers now versus what it was when Pata started maybe like 15 years ago. It's way different because everything has a price tag to it. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with any subculture is that there's so many ways and people interested in jumping in and monetizing it. And I think that's where you have to be very careful because where there's money to be made, I think the intentions can sometimes be skewed. So how do you both support culture? And I think everyone on this panel exists in some sort of creative culture, right? We, whether it's me like doing creative agency work for a sneaker company, G selling clothing, the ladies doing hip hop and music. It's like there's always something there that has to track back to the sale of something for the most part. Like you're selling tickets, you're selling merchandise, etc. And I think that's the one thing that for me, it's trying to come to terms with can creative culture exist without a layer of consumerism? And I don't think so currently. Like the model doesn't exist for it to work. Just like I'm going to create something for the sake of it, because otherwise it's just an art project. So that's, I think, the challenge for a lot of creatives now is just figuring out, what's the balance between pushing forward the right message versus like making sure I pay my bills and I can continue doing this and having a platform for it.
Yeah. Well, very, man. I have a lot of questions I want to pose you in return, but perhaps I'll choose this one. So I also try to answer this question: what is culture? But also in this context of the panel today in business, and I came up with a statement that I would like to hear your thoughts of, and the other panelists too, which states, for me, investing in a culture means investing in human capital. just try to break it down, right? So as a company, you can invest in your fixed assets, but you have this thing called humans, and humans need a little bit more than just their wage, right? So yeah, before I give you guys all my thoughts about that statement, Eugene, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning stages, like when you start something, like start a culture, a movement, a community, there's no sort of transaction beyond sort of the intangible value. Like, a voice is now heard because you've created a platform, right? I think that's the one thing that is the beauty of subcultures, because no one does it because they're trying to get paid, because there's no money to be made. It's just that there's at some point there's a tipping point where we have to kind of assess what happens, and I don't think it's good or bad. It's just just recognizing that at some point, like, it's also okay to cash out and or make money, but can you do it in a way that allows you to be a bit more balanced? Like, I've only really looked at it because I've never been in that consumer brand space where I have something there where I'm like, hey, you know what, this is really popular. I'm going to start opening more doors. I'm going to start putting it here, there. I'm going to start doing collaborations with things that I know will sell, etc. And I used to think like, yo, that's so whack. But then as I get older, I'm like, well, if anything, if you recognize how creative culture works, it's like, someone made a really good example. It's like the Hollywood director. He might make one movie for the studios to make a ton of money, but then that allows him the leeway to do something for himself. And I think that is the push pull that we always have to do. It's like, you might have to play that set where it's like top 40 music, but that's because that's what they want for this crowd, and that'll pay your bills. And then you can also go, do like a Boiler Room or something that has no financial pressures at all. And I think that's sort of the challenge for most creative people, is like, you obviously don't want to struggle for the entirety of your life, so you're trying to find that balance. And I had to learn that too. I mean, coming from a pure editorial space, especially in the early days of making, like, at Hypebeast, I didn't really have any overarching financial pressures to put out content that we felt was for the sake of like selling ads, right? It was more like, hey, is this whack or is this cool? And that was just like the driving force behind it. And obviously, as things grow, like, I'm sure there's different, I've been far removed for the last 5 years, so I'm sure there's different goals that need to be achieved there. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of appreciated the purity of just like, what do you think needs to be out in the world, and can you justify it, versus like, the reason I'm putting this out because I'm trying to get paid,
Yeah.
right?
So let me see if I'm getting you correctly. Yeah? So one of the challenges in my work in publishing is that you have a finite amount of money, you have a finite amount of capacity, and how do you decide what you publish? So to give you an example, and that could be a nice bridge to how the current world is affecting the culture. You would say it's never been easier for me to publish books because there's plenty of stories pertaining to, for instance, the Black experience that I could tap into. I can assure you, a couple of years ago, they weren't so prevalent and in my mailbox as they are right now. Would you guys say it's easier, perhaps, for the actors within the culture to realize whatever they need to realize, or would you say it's actually become more difficult? What are your thoughts, ladies love hip hop?
I think it depends on like what the goal is. If it is to capitalize, then yes, there's more room and there's more openness from the consumer perspective as well. But at the same time, you have to remember why you're doing what you're doing or what your goal is. So, yeah. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we started off with a DJ collective, not thinking we would ever like make any money off it. So for us, it's just like it has taken us these kind of years to realize like what we can do and what kind of like difference we can make, and it has taken us to this point to be like, okay, we're gonna have to make some money because we can't do this for free, and because you know, in the end of the day, we want to do even more. We want to keep on creating and we want to keep on making things better. And for that to happen, we're going to have to, in some way, be able to live off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it depends on what your intentions with your um, with the culture is. But I think as Linda said, there's so many like outlets and social medias where you can make money quite easily. Um, but I think it's very like see-through today if you're in it for the money or for another reason.
Yeah, the intrinsic reasons.
Mm.
Gene, how would you say you guys balance out, yeah, commerce perhaps even versus yeah, those intrinsic values that you know, fuel all of us in the culture?
Well, you know what I just said in the beginning, describing a little bit my position in terms of what we have meant for culture. In connotation to your question, in this question, I can be very firm and very clear, and that is that we are a resistance by existence from the start. You know, we could have made tons and tons and tons and tons of choices as Pata to be a very, very big company now with a gazillion doors and everything like that. But by us existing, we create space and we create room. And we do that in the best possible way, you know? And for us, it's also another thing like, to me, it doesn't really matter if people are opportunistic now, in a sense that they take advantage from whatever is the whim of the day because it has been like this and it will always stay like this. You know what matters though is how we stand in it. You know, this stuff has not been a thing for us for a day. This is pata. You know, this is who we are. So you can track it. You can make the track record. You can see what we have done. And it's only till this day now that people open up their eyes and they say, like, hey, man, we might have to do an interview with Fantastic Man with this guy because he did da 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 da. This is 2020. We exist from 2004. You know, we did everything from Nike things to running teams to everything like that. But none of our stuff is opportunistic. You know, it's nothing bad to make money. That's not by essence opportunistic. We have to we have to do what we got to do to make the moves that we need to make to become bigger, to become the examples that we are. You know what I mean? Because us having success means that the people that come after us are going to be more successful than us. And this is our goal. And it always has been this.
I see, and clear. Eugene, since this question started with you, um, so how would you say we're talking now about this commerce versus almost intrinsic motivation when it comes to entrepreneurs or even individuals trying to make an impact in this culture? Um, yeah, do you subscribe to all of our answers, or do you say, ah, man, this might be a little bit more complicated than you guys maybe wanted to come over? Maybe I can even give you a concrete question.
Yeah.
Back in the days, there used to be these gatekeepers, you know, tastemakers, the people that can evaluate, or the organization that can evaluate whether something is real, whether something is authentic. How would you say those checks and balances are done nowadays? Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredibly nuanced question because I think everyone's situation will differ, right? And it's also circumstantial. Like, I'm sure there are brands out there that have the luxury of just like staying super small, or they want to stay super small. But I've also been thinking to myself too, and this is obviously a very different mindset, because if you asked me 10 years ago, it's like shit has to be cool straight up. Like it can't really waver from that. But then as I get older, I'm thinking to myself like, one thing that's interesting about like the growth of a company also means that you can support other people. And how important is that, right? How important is it to be very small? And this is all in relative terms, right? Because I think that at the end of the day, it's like everyone's has, as the girls mentioned, like different goals that they want to achieve. But I've been thinking about that too, because I don't run big companies or big businesses, but I also think like when I do have the ability to take care of someone on a small level, like it actually means a lot to me. And how do you start expanding upon that and giving people opportunity? But in terms of like the actual sort of like determining what's right or wrong, I think a lot of it just comes down to like people having a general sentiment as to like, as it was mentioned, like why you want to do something. And I don't think that why is answered sufficiently enough. And then it also leads back into the whole thing around gatekeepers. I think the democratization of the internet was in many ways a good thing, but the unpopular opinion that I would hold is that it also gave people that probably did not have, didn't do their homework, didn't actually come to the table having stress tested their ideas, gone through the experiences of getting something. Like I think it gave them a lot of voice when I don't think they were necessarily deserving of it. And it just in many ways sucks the oxygen out of the room. And it's not to say that you're not giving people opportunities, but it was basically binary. It was like yesterday it was like, hey, you had a bunch of gatekeepers that probably that wasn't good. But then on the flip side, you let the whole world in. And I think we all recognize that you can't really have the extremities exist. You kind of need something in the middle. And especially in the world of fashion, like you saw how traditional fashion media struggled because influencers came in who didn't necessarily have a great point of view, or I guess that's the wrong way of saying it. It's more like they didn't have the same analytical point of view that stemmed from traditional media, but it didn't mean they didn't have an audience. But I think that if you look at traditionally speaking, just using fashion because I'm most familiar with it, I think that you push things in a different direction where the influencer was touted for their ability to move product, but I think the traditional media outlet also looked at fashion not necessarily as a way to sell product, but a way to like advance culture because it was holding people accountable. I think there's less accountability when there's a more democratic platform, if that makes sense, because this is done in a bit of a different way because everyone has a voice.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make sure that we don't confuse like a democratic culture with like democracy in a political setting, in a political system. I think that's what I want to make sure is not confused.
I think that's clear, actually. So, guys, we have the first half of the panel behind us. I thought perhaps as a little intermission or to switch it up, we can touch on a couple questions from the people at home. And I prepared a couple, quick round questions or statements for which I would love your response in a minute or less. Just hear the first response that comes into your mind. Sound good?
Good.
Okay. So let me start with this one. So this festival is a business-to-business festival. So there must be a lot of companies watching, trying to have some takeaways, how they could impact the culture. Why it's important to be a cultural accelerator, how their brand fits within this whole culture. So perhaps we can help them out a little bit. So first statement, and whoever wants to give their thoughts on this one, please do. Advice for companies: don't reinvent yourself. Reinventing is becoming something completely different. Rather evolve. Evolve and take the people with you on that journey. Because that's authentic, right? Becoming something you're completely not is the definition of inauthenticity, while evolution from a point is. Any takers?
I guess I'll bite. Like I think
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about authenticity in that regard, and sometimes like authenticity can also like be paradoxical in that maybe you as a brand or a person, your most authentic move is just to go where the next trend is, and that is your personality, right? So I think authenticity might actually be like overrated, but I think what is critical is like when people make decisions based on authenticity, I think it's at its very core making decisions based off of like personal interest and happiness. I think more personal happiness. Like if I can make a decision because I believe that this is something that makes me happy, then I think that's an authentic decision.
Oh, that's an interesting takeaway and angle. Okay, quick question number 2. I'll pose this one for you, G.
Mhm.
Companies should take the emancipation of the consumer seriously.
I take the consumer seriously. Period. You know, you're nothing without your consumer. So in that sense, yeah, of course. But you know, the whole thing is also like you have to also very much know yourself. You know, like taking your consumer seriously doesn't mean that you don't have to know who you are yourself and what you are doing. We always been super accessible. Eh? Like you could always find me or Edson in the store until 2-3 years ago. You know, there's no other brand like us with the type of stuff that we do that has that type of accessibility. So
Yeah.
you know, like it's one of our basic values. You know, yeah.
Nice. And as a consumer, I can honestly state that I've always had that feeling that you take us as a consumer very serious. And it could be in the simple stuff as
And it's not easy, yeah. It's not
Yeah.
easy, you know. Sometimes it's very like painful, or sometimes, you know, no, it takes a little bit of self-reflection as well because your openness can also bite you in the ass, and it also can be very hurtful. You know how the internet can work, you know, like a fucked up comment section or everybody on Hypebeast hating whatever you put your guts in.
Yeah.
You can play the cool guy and say like, "Yo, I don't care," you know, like as long as my stuff sells. But I put a lot of like heart and a lot of effort and a lot of like love into the things that I do. So yeah, it can be at times it can be hurtful, but I guess that's also a part of progress. So it's all good.
I see. So when we're talking about this that hurts, I have a question from Gabriel from the audience for Eugene. Do you think the cultural democracy you were just talking about will self-regulate to a more balanced place, or does it need some guidance?
This is like a super challenging question because I think that there's going to be pockets that go to different directions. And one thing that I like to talk or I like to reference a lot is like media fragmentation. And if I look at the more democratic sort of the overview, I think that your ability to do anything right now has never been so easy. If I want to start a t-shirt brand tomorrow and put on Shopify, I could probably do that like in a day, right? Like it was probably a lot harder when Pata started like 15 years ago, finding manufacturers, making sure the quality was on point. Like it's so much easier now, right? But I think on the flip side is that as long as our media distribution is going to be social media, I think it's going to be hard to have this sort of accountability because it's just going to push people into these like these filter bubbles that people talk about. So I'm sure of the 5 of us on this panel right now, like each of us follows someone that might have like 500,000 followers that the other person hasn't heard of before, right? And I think that in itself will just like consolidate ideas and thoughts within those small pockets of communities. So in those, and especially the way that we interact with media now, it's like I follow this person because I want to be interested in what they say, and it doesn't really create a two-way dialogue. Like if I follow, let's say a football, like I follow like Ronaldo or something, right? In general, most people that follow him are doing it because they're a fan. And anytime you have any questioning of Ronaldo as a person, as a performance, I'm sure it's not what people are signing up for, right? I think that's the most difficult thing about the inability to have conversation in a social media environment.
Good answer. And Gabriel, I hope you're as content with the answer as well. So for the ladies, I have a question from Bikkel Amsterdam. So I think this question is from Amsterdam. And you guys can answer it from the business point of view or from the artist point of view. I'll leave that to you. Investing in a local culture risky versus investing in an international culture? And in your perspective, is local culture still feasible? And why I pose you guys this question. So you guys are localized in Stockholm, Sweden. From my POV, maybe not the most global place in the world, but I could be completely wrong. Um, but one of your biggest, how do you call it, like amplifiers in your journey was the performance you guys did for Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? Or opening up for them.
Yeah. But
So
also, like, for us, like, our community and our culture, since it's since it consists of a lot of like creators in Stockholm and Sweden, it's very like attractive for different brands and stuff like that. So by investing in that, it's like a genuine way for brands to showcase products or whatever it is that their intention is.
Yeah, and I think it's just also about, you know, if you're investing in the local culture, then you might as well do it for the long run and like, really invest in it and be aware of, okay, this is a growing culture. We're here now. We want to take it there and see the like the soft values of it more than, you know, if I think about the international culture, then it's more um, yeah, it's like it's two different ways of and two different intentions with what you want to do with the culture. So investing in the local culture, it's more it has a huge effect, um, but it might take some while. But it has a huge effect, of course, um, in the future and how everything's going to play out. Um, so yeah, I think it depends. Two different ways of tapping in.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
So, G, I wanted to also forward this question to you, since Pate is a local hero, but obviously internationally held in high regard as well. Uh,
Mhm.
as a genuine player in this subculture, with great passion for you guys do, how much value do you guys place on, the credit you guys receive from perhaps your peers or the international, community consumer, to put it that way? Do you feel it's even relevant, or do you say, man, as long as we sell out, you cannot please everybody?
we don't always sell out. So no, yeah, you know what the thing is? It kind of depends on. Of course, I like recognition. I think the most important is first of all the people that surround me that I'm very close with. So that's the people, that is kind of my closest community and the people I work with. Then come the consumers, and then peers come in on another level. Like I see it also a little bit as sports. I want to be good. I want to do dope stuff. You know what I mean? When we're talking about purely product and the things that we put into the world that have a more of a materialistic or a consumer type thing. All the other stuff to me is more something that feels like that is closest to my heart. That I don't really care about the recognition or stuff like that when it comes to the stuff that we do. When it comes to social or pushing of black culture and awareness, So it's different for different cases, but like in that order that I just told you, like like when it comes to direct recognition, like yeah, people around me that I value, like consumers, like all that stuff. I like if they like what we doing, yeah, I'm down with that. Like that's cool.
Yeah. If I could jump in real quick, like I think Pata is like such a great example of someone, like a brand that started local but ended up being like very successful internationally in terms of recognition. And I think that that's the one thing that I find most interesting is that, it's the easier it is to see your quote unquote consumer, I think the easier your job is. Like if you're trying to sell something to someone far away that you can't interact with on a daily, it's going to be so much more difficult. And I think there's something about the nuance that comes with serving your local community. And you can look at all virtually all the like success stories that have come up within, you know, this world of streetwear, most of them have a very strong affinity to their city. It's like the hundreds in LA, it's like Supreme in New York, Pata, Amsterdam. Like I think it's quite clear that they rep a city really hard, and that in itself creates the critical mass. Now there is a caveat, because I think that if you live in a place that can't have any sort of critical mass, then it just becomes really difficult, right? If I live in a town that only has, I don't know, like 12,000 people, it's just going to be very challenging and difficult. I think there's a balance point there that you need to overcome, but at the same time, you do recognize the value of this in terms of going and starting local.
Yeah. And I'd like to add to that, Eugene. That's perhaps what I meant earlier when I said companies need to take the emancipation of the consumer a bit more seriously. I see how companies talk about the culture as if it's an extra thing, as if it's not at the center and heart of doing business at the moment. And sometimes I want to communicate that even in those small towns of 12,000 inhabitants, luckily now through the internet and the democratization we're talking about, that kid could form our own culture or tap into our own subculture, with people all across the world, basically enlarging your target consumer audience, right? So I see we still have 15 minutes to go. I have two more questions, I believe, from the audience. Please, viewers, if you have a question you want to pose our panelists, feel free to send it to us. And same goes for you guys on the panel. If there's something you guys want to convey in a little bit, please start thinking about it. Time is going very, very fast. Eugene, question for you. And the question is from Mr. DRMKT. Gentleman states, I'm a producer entrepreneur, just started out with a platform that started off because of supporting a culture. What advice do you have for me that struggles? Do you have for me? He's struggling with asking something in return for his goods or services. So he gave us an example. He finds it hard to ask a financial return.
Yeah. I this is always like a very challenging thing. Like I don't know if it's like a media platform or what, but in general, before you even get to that sort of financial play, I actually think there's a moment in time that you need to like stress test yourself. Like some people are really in love with the idea of being their own boss or an entrepreneur, but sometimes when push comes to shove, like 6 months later and you haven't really made traction, are you still going to do it? And like I think that is there's no definitive timeline, but it's just like how much do you really care about this? And I'm not questioning obviously his intent, but I think that that's part of the initial process of laying the foundation. If you can kind of do something without getting paid, I think that's actually a great signal that there's an opportunity here for you to figure something out down the line. Now, when you start going into like, how do I turn this into a business? And I'm speaking from experience here, because when we started making, like, we had this idea 2016. It's like, hey, let's do like audio stories, go very heavy into audio. Let's do like a hard membership model for media. And I don't think the world was ready for it. And I still don't think media is ready for it. So understanding what value you can provide to your consumer, I think is really important. Like, in the eyes of fashion, it's like when you put on, obviously it's easy to use Pata, but when you put on like a Pata shirt, it's like, hey, I'm repping Amsterdam, I'm repping a certain culture, right? Likewise for I'll call him Dr. Market, DAMKT, but like I think that's the thing, is like understanding what are the things that I can provide value, because ultimately at the end of the day you're providing some sort of exchange, some sort of, as unsexy of a word is, like a transaction of sorts. So like, can I provide them with like help in developing their own businesses? Like this is, because I don't really know what the product is. Is it about merchandise? Is it about like exclusive content? I think there's a lot of different ways to monetize it. And it's also like lining out what are all the ways we can make money, right? And I think once you have that sort of solidified, it opens the doors to like what makes the most sense. And like the balance is, how much time and effort are you going to put into something, and put in enough time and effort to ensure that I tried it properly before moving on to the next thing and knowing this is going to work or not. Like if I'm going to do t-shirts, like what is a realistic amount of effort I should put in before I understand if it's worth it or not. And maybe it's not. Maybe like getting people to pay for my content is easier for me.
Yeah.
Very long-winded answer, but I think it's not an easy thing to answer.
No, it was a long question and a serious question, because I think that's what many definitely starting entrepreneurs or creatives struggle with, right? You make your product, you develop your service, and then comes time to develop your ask, and that's something that's obviously not easy, as you highlighted in your question. Hey, we're gonna do a little segue, and then we'll end up at the last question. So we got a question from Randy, about me, asking why it's important for business to invest in culture. So I'm gonna set you guys off. So why is this relevant? Why is it relevant for viewers and companies looking at our panel to invest in the culture, basically? So how I see it is, within marketing, we want to create value around products and services, right? Products and services for our customers. I think we must understand what is valuable to our customers, as Eugene just explained to us, and to understand their values, to know their backgrounds, something that G was talking about a little bit earlier. So understanding culture and the way it moves is simply understanding not only your customers, but also your partners, which stories you guys are about to tell. I find Ladies Love Hip Hop a very interesting example of that, almost a benchmark example of not understanding and focusing on your customers, but also towards the people standing on your side. So I think once you formulated which stories you want to tell, it's then paramount importance to keep yourself in check and only build on authentic and sustainable relationships with whoever is in your community. I feel that's why this subject is super relevant, and more relevant than ever. Just some thoughts about why it's so important for companies to dive into this concept and phenomenon called the culture. Mr. G.
Well, you know what? It also kind of depends on what your position is. I, for one, I can say, like, if I as a business invest in culture, I invest in myself. I am part of the culture. I am culture in that sense. My position might be different than another business, but for that other business that wants to invest in culture, it's not more than normal, because you already have been taking advantage of it for a lot of these examples. So it's now becoming more of a question that people have to be accountable for specific stuff. And what the thing is, you can't just take without thinking that things come at a specific price. And a lot of things have been taken for granted or haven't been seen as things that are have monetary values. Only now, years ahead in this business, people start seeing what specific things are worth. And it also touches a little bit on some stuff that Eugene said earlier, and only he can say it the way he says it. But it also has to do with the democracy of everybody that can put stuff now on social media and stuff like that, which kind of makes it easier to make that money. All this type of stuff, it's all kind of what it is, because I truly still believe in natural selection. Like whatever time comes ahead, when you're a specific type of entrepreneur and you're doing your stuff for the specific reasons, you will find a way to make it work for yourself.
Yeah, man. I see. And same question for you ladies. Why do you guys feel that investing in this culture is relevant at this day that we're speaking, and for big companies, etc.?
Well, just like as an example, we've done a lot of different collabs with different brands, and the times when we felt the most um, like right is when it has had when the company or when the brand has had a person who has the knowledge and who can represent the culture from the inside. So I think it's important, if you are in some way tapping into the culture, you need to have the representation within the brand or the company to know uh, who is going to have who's going to be the priority to uplift or give the opportunities to. And for example, we did a collaboration with Puma when Linda Naples um, had her first, what do you say, when you released her first single and music video. And just by working with a person who understood what we were about and who were willing to invest in that, just and trusting us, we from there like could build, and we and that person and the entire Puma got our trust. And I think that's so important to think like in the long term, what effects it has if you really invest in the culture from the inside out versus just tapping in however you want. Because if you're just tapping in, then that can have some serious consequences and it can affect communities.
It's like, and we need it. Also, we need investors, we need collaborations, we need the brands to survive because of like the community here. Like Sweden is not that big of a country, so we can't just go around by doing events, doing festivals. We need to make those collaborations happen. So it's like really important that they can happen, and that's where representation and you know um how do you say that?
Diversity.
Yeah, diversity is really important. That it's like since, like I said, Sweden is a little bit a smaller country. That's not always the case, and that's where it can't go wrong. So, yeah, it's important to us to answer the question. We need those collaborations.
I hear you. Okay, for my last question, I'm gonna start off with Eugene, and yeah, please feel free to add if you guys also have some thoughts on this. I wanted to end up with looking towards the future. Looking towards the next decade, as you talked about earlier from your profession as an editor. Yeah, you have the competence to make an analysis like that. So let's do a little trend forecasting if we can with the four of us. Which phenomenons do we see at the forefront of this cultural revolution? How is this next decade looking? Will it be harder or easier for people to get their dreams realized? Just giving you some concepts that maybe can help you formulate your answer. At the moment we see some trends when we look at the culture. Um, Locality is a trend, storytelling is a trend, transparency is a trend, sustainability. And when I say trend, I don't mean fad. It's two different things. So, Mr. Eugene, looking towards this next decade, what are your thoughts?
So it's super difficult. I think that the one thing I believe in is like this bifurcation, and basically that just means that it's either the top end or the bottom end. So either you're going to be a massive brand, or you're going to be something that's a lot more niche. And I think the days of having this sort of in between are going to probably go to the wayside. Either you transition out of being a small brand and then you blow up. And I think the reason being is that either you're hyper focused on your consumer, or you have the funding, you have like celebrity backing to cut through all the noise. Because I think for most brands right now, I think we all have experienced it, the biggest challenge right now is how do I get my message across to the people that care the most in such a noisy environment without having to pay Facebook or Instagram to put an ad up, right? I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges. So, you know, if you can do something small but very concentrated, I think there's far more things you can do now to be able to be to generate revenue, especially like you could build a direct to consumer brand. Not to say that's like the end all be all, but I think that that's something that's on the table now that maybe was a little bit more challenging, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
Within your industry, within your scene, where do you see this whole thing developing? Do you care, or will you guys just continue to do you? And
I think the challenge is like, so to use that exact example I said, it's like it's the New York Times on the very like lopsided, like this is the well established media platform, and then on the smaller side, it's like one singular person writing a newsletter and getting paid $5 a month, and they have let's say 1,000 people paying them $5 a month, and that's their income, right? I think that's kind of the examples I'm looking at. I think it's actually quite difficult for you to build something right in the middle right now. Not to say it's not possible, but it's like honestly it's quite challenging, because if I use media, it's like advertising is not the same as it was before. um, and people haven't, and it's not like you've had people pick up with subscriptions on a level that can support like a mid-tier publication. Yeah, I don't want to get too like nerdy about like use examples, but I think that that's sort of something to look into, and I think it also applies perhaps in like the world of like food and beverage and restaurants. Like, either you have like higher end stuff, or you have like kind of the lower end like fast casual. I think the middle is kind of getting carved out.
yeah, I see. Now, we're definitely going to continue some of your strong points when it comes to this publishing game, but that's for after this call. G, within your fashion industry, yeah, what kind of changes are you seeing happening in the culture? And just looking forward, how do you see the scene developing?
Well, you know what? Questions are going to get way more important. What, why, how, with who, all these questions and the answers that needs to be given on that, whether you can do that directly, or whether that's because the public demands this of you, or whatever, or because it's needed because the world is just falling apart. All these questions are becoming more and more and more apparent. And years ago you could swipe a lot of stuff under the rug, but the reality is that each and everybody and every brand and every person just has a lot of work to do. And I guess that's the general consensus of the coming years. So people are going to start buying into a brand not only because they are super cool or super hype or super whatever. It's going to get more and more important. What, why, how, with who, and all these things. So that's what that's what I see as a future thing. Yeah.
Check. Hey, and ladies, same question to you in closing remark. In your industry of music, we are at the music festival. Where do you guys see this scene developing? How do you see the culture changing? And yeah, is it a positive outlook when looking to the next 10 years?
Like locally here in Sweden, is progressing really fast, and like my kind of genre, the music that I make, I didn't think of making music like 5 years ago. I didn't think that it would be possible to do what I do in Sweden, but today it is. So like the alternative scene is just growing, the subgenres are growing, and also like in general, the music scene is broadening a lot here. And our biggest stars, it's probably the same in your countries, are the hip hop artists, the rappers, and that's very new for Sweden. So we see a lot of positive things happening in our field here, and feel very proud to be a part of the development.
Nice. Hey, I think we have come to the end of our panel. Looking at the time, just asking the team: do we still have any questions from the audience? Perhaps we can tackle one. And no. If not, I would like to end with a couple of remarks and takeaways that I at least have from this conversation. We highlighted why it's important for these brands to invest in the culture. The first thing is that culture is fairly hard to define, right? We all know the Googleable definition, but I believe all four of us gave somewhat of a different answer. So perhaps it's good to know that culture isn't this monolith that maybe sometimes when we talk about it, we make it seem like. For me, a takeaway is, investing in culture is, that investing in human capital. I've heard a lot from you guys, that funding and finances and being able to live off your craft is something that's fairly important. I've learned that investing in culture equals embracing change. That this is something that you need to be aware of and need to be able to embrace. I think I still love my advice for companies not to change themselves or reinvent themselves from the ground up, but rather to evolve, take the people with them, and take the people on a journey. As G highlighted, it's going to be so important how you do things, why you do things, with whom you do things. Um, this piece of transparency, I think, is going to be on the forefront in so many industries. So, whether it be your artist or your companies at home, think about this stuff. Try to formulate or to analyze what you're doing at the moment, with whom you're doing it, how you're doing it, and challenge yourself. So that's my roundup for our panel. I would love to thank Mr. G here in Amsterdam from Pata. I'd love to thank Ladies Love Hip Hop from Stockholm. Thank you so much for your addition, and I can't wait for this COVID thing to be over to visit one of your parties. And Eugene, my fellow brother in arms in this publishing game, thank you so much for your amazing contribution. And for the people at home, please keep the questions coming, and the team will try to answer them even after this panel. So
Thank you, Gunny.
great
Thanks
evening,
a lot, guys. It's a pleasure. It's an honor too.
Yes.
Bye, ladies.
And keep on for the culture. Yes.
Yes.
See you guys.